In the studio with me this week, Shubhankar Mitra is the head strategic consulting at JLL India, Arvind Nandan, independent analyst who's been helping us for several months now, and Jayesh Kurup, head of content and research at magicbricks.com. Magic Bricks is also our knowledge partner. All right, so if you're a regular viewer on the show, you know we've spent a lot of time talking about what to keep in mind when you're buying a home, when you're buying an under construction apartment, when you're buying a home from a third party who's not a builder. But we've also been receiving a lot of questions from you asking us about buying land. Does it make sense right now to invest in land? What sort of land should we be looking at? Because there are various options. You could just buy a plot of land and hope that one day a builder will buy it to construct flats. Or you could look at something that's closer to maybe our industrial corridors. Those are the questions we're going to answer on the show today, and which is why I'm so glad to have all three of our guests in the studio. Well, Arvind, when we talk about buying land, the rules are very different from, buying an apartment perhaps and making an investment. If I were to ask you to compare the two right now, which one would you recommend? Would you say that buying land right now has a higher chance of maybe giving us returns over the next few years?
Of course. In fact, if you are a risk taker and if you have the capability, buying land or investing in a plot is always going to be much more beneficial for the simple reason that you are investing in an asset which is as yet not ready. So obviously the return possibilities, the spectrum of return is going to be much bigger, much higher. Obviously it comes with its own risks. So if you are a risk taker who has the capability and the investment muscle, definitely go for plot. But if you are not, if you do not have enough capabilities, if you are somebody who's not able to go and guard your investment, better go for a flat. So if you are capable, then definitely a plot.
What would you recommend? Who should we be buying land from right now?
That's a good question. In fact, there could be multiple sources, but I would broadly divide them in three categories. One is you could buy land from a government authority or a statutory authority, any of the development authorities, any of the industrial development authorities. There are many different state authorities. So government is one source. Then there are plotted developments done by builders, private developers. You could take it from them as well. And the third category is buying it from anybody in the market, a private seller. So if you look at the market broadly, these are the three categories. Each has its own sets of positives and negatives. You need to analyze them very closely.
All right, Jayesh, I want to bring you in here. I mean, buying the land is only one half of that story. If I want to make a profit of that investment, I should also be able to sell it for a profit in the future. Tell us what the movement or the interest is right now among investors for land as an investment, whether the land is moving fast enough, or is there is there enough investment interest coming in right now on the website?
Land is something that you will buy when mostly it is driven by investors, and right now investors are not very active in the market across markets. It is the end user who's buying. But even among end users, I do see some amount of interest in land because the volume of queries that we're receiving about land has gone up, which means that either they're potential investors or end users who are looking to buy land because the values have been fairly flat over the past couple of years. But there's definitely interest, and I would say that the minute investors get into the land market, the end users are driven away because the price of land goes up significantly. Right now, for the past year and a half, the value of land has not appreciated significantly. So we do see a lot of a rising interest, but I don't see that much transactions on the ground.
All right, that's a serious risk to take on, Shubhankar. If I were to ask you to list out the risks that I'll be taking on by buying land, what would they be vis-a-vis, say, buying an apartment as an investment?
Now, unfortunately, in India, land is a very, very non-transparent market and very, very under-regulated, or maybe over-regulated, not under-regulated, over-regulated, but, kind of unorganized. So therefore, there are a lot of inherent risk when you buy a land. It starts from what type of land you are buying. As Arvind says, that if you buy it from a government source, it would be much more safer in terms of the titles. But the moment you go for private purchases or agricultural land purchases, etc., the risk of title and litigations and disputes become furthermore. I'll just talk about few common things which happens when you go and purchase land. Unlike government land, which is very well demarcated and very well defined in a setup, the problem occurs with the boundaries and the edges. Then there are, ownership issues are there. So if suppose if you are buying it from a private person, it may be like it is an inherited property, and there are, lots of other claimants to that same property, so which might take you to disputes. Also, there are land falls into different kind of zoning. Maybe that you are buying land for residential purpose, but the land is put under a zone of industries or put under a zone of no development, which you are not aware of as a common man. So then you end up paying for the land, and then eventually you are not being able to do anything out of it. So there are all these challenges are there while buying land, and unfortunately the institutional support to buy land is not available to a common man to that extent that the kind of support is available to buy an apartment.
Very broadly, you talked about boundaries, ownership issues, zoning, and of course, there's the whole risk of somebody else squatting on your land or you're not able to protect it. Jayashree, I want to come back to you here. Now, if I'm going to consider all of these risks as an investor, could you give us a list of to-dos that I can use to mitigate all of these risks right now if I'm going to go out and buy land?
I would say that when you buy from an authority, you don't have to bother about the title of the land. The second thing that I would say is if you're buying from a developer, first check the zoning and map the zoning of the city's master plan with the plot that you're buying. Ensure that it is in the residential zone. The second thing that you have to do is if you're buying from a private developer and you want to ensure that your property is safe, please check, get the land titles checked for at least the last 30 years. Disputes can arise over the last 30-year period. Once you've checked out 30-year clean titles, then you don't have by and large, you don't have a problem. The other thing that you have to see is once you buy the land, is it being measured? If it is from a developer who has actually laid out the properties, then you can select your plot on the layout. But if you're going to buy from a unstructured seller, then you have to actually mark the boundaries and make sure that you check out what you get is what you have paid for. One more thing that people don't do is they buy land and let it lie, thinking that it is a long-term investment. Please visit your land regularly. Make sure that at least once or twice a year you have visited it, even though you don't intend to either occupy or build on it yet, because land is something that can be encroached, and if you do it in the early stages, the chances of your not getting into litigation is very high.
Well, Arvind, if we keep all of that in mind and we pick the land that we're buying very carefully, what sort of return can one expect really from, from an investment in land, especially if we look at something that's closer to our industrial corridors or on the outskirts of our cities? If we're looking at, say, 8% from resi property over the next couple of years, what are we looking at from land?
That's an interesting question, and a question that's always encountered. First of all, I'll be very happy if a residential property gave me a yield of 8% in today's market. We don't go beyond 4% normally these days. But yeah, jokes apart, the first thing to remember is when you invest in land, you are investing in an undercooked asset, which means you are taking a risk. Therefore, you will have a higher return. A fully finished product today, a residential apartment fetches you somewhere in the range of 4 or 5% if it is a good quality property. If you invest in land, now capital appreciation could be humongous. It could be in a very, very open range. If you are buying a property which is in a developing location, it could double in a few years' time. So if you put the two together, then you are definitely looking at an investment which is 100% plus. A return which is 100% plus if you add the capital appreciation part as well.
So remember, this is the interesting part. A lot of our guests over the last couple of weeks have been debating the fact that residential property might not give us even 8% in the years to come on an annualized basis, which means that it's not even beating a fixed deposit. In that case, if land is more attractive, there are some risks, but it's only going to be more attractive if you pick the right land in the right locations. Welcome back. You're watching The Property Guide in ET Now. Thank you for staying with us. This week, we're talking about investing in land. Now, before we went into break, we talked about the fact that there are risks to worry about when you're investing in land. And if you want a list of all of the precautions that you can take, you can write to us. Email ID is on your screen. We'll be glad to send that list to you. What we're going to talk about now is selecting the location for that investment that will give you the best possible return. And each of our guests have been kind enough to pick out 2 locations that they believe are hot markets right now to buy land. I'm going to start with Jayashree first. Jayashree, if I were to ask you to pick out two markets right now where I could buy land with the hope of doubling my money in the next couple of years, which ones would they be?
I would say the industrial corridor of Pune, where you can get some amount of land, and Ghaziabad. These are the two areas where you can enter at reasonable rates and you will be able to make a profit because there is future potential and of appreciation.
Jayashree, very quickly, are there any specific risks to buying land in either Pune or Ghaziabad at this point that an investor should keep in mind before they take your advice?
Absolutely. Go for those areas which have reasonably well-developed infrastructure or planned infrastructure there, which means that along the transport corridors, and you should know that it is either getting into the master planned areas or it has future potential of getting into the master planned areas. You also have to ensure that if the land use has been changed, it's easier for you as a retail investor. Otherwise, at least make sure that it is in the residential master planned area of the city.
All right, Jayashree. Shubhankar, I know that Pune is a pet market for you.
Yeah.
But do you want to add to that? Does Pune also make your list of two markets to consider if you're buying land?
Given a choice, I would go by Pune, definitely. MMR, if something is available at a reasonable price as a different location, definitely, because these are the market which can't be beat in any time near future. I would also put in Bangalore. I'll probably put Bangalore and Pune in a same level.
All right, I'm going to push it slightly further. When you say MMR, there are obviously three choices at this point. We could look at the Panvel stretch or further down from that side. There's the Thane stretch going up to Badlapur and even further. And then there's the western line that goes right up to, Ahmedabad, if we want to go that far.
Correct.
But if I were to ask you to pick land across any of these three highways, which ones would you choose?
See, in terms of long-term growth potential, out of the three, two has got kind of promises of the opportunities. One is the western corridor that goes towards the Ahmedabad route. Now, we don't see that many plotted projects coming up over there. Now, the other corridor, which is in the Panvel corridor. Now, if we look at the prospect or the promises that holds for the future, including the Trans-Harbour Link and the airport and MACZ and all those kind of factors. So, obviously, the balance will be slightly tilted towards that. And there are plotted projects coming up in the periphery areas of Panvel and all, few developers although. And now CIDCO has created a whole new jurisdiction called NAINA.
Yes.
NAINA. So there also there will be plots available, which will be much more sanitized plot in that sense. So investor will be much more safer to look at those options.
All right. So remember, we talked about Pune, Ghaziabad, the MMR region, Panvel, and the NAINA, plots of land in particular. Now I'm going to ask you for your two, and you said you have so many, but pick your two favorites and I want you to pick land that will give us that 100% that you talked about before we went into break.
Sure. If I were to pick up two markets, I'm a very big fan of the Bangalore Northern Corridor. I keep saying about it, talking about it in various programs. But Bangalore Northern Corridor, particularly close to the airport, a lot of questions will be raised whether it's actually doing very well. People have exited from there. But even now, that is one of my hot favorites. Pune is as well, but I'll give the Northern Corridor of Bangalore a higher preference. The other one is a slightly out-of-the-box kind of a market, and I was there just 24 hours ago. I would like to choose something like Kanhaiya Raipur. It is not something which occurs to you during your normal course of thinking, but having seen that and the way it's coming up, a massive new urban center, probably the only one being created in India right now, with completely state-of-the-art facilities, I would rather pick something in that belt as well if I am a long-term player. If I'm somebody who's looking to just double my money in 2 or 3 years, then probably I won't go there. Then I'll rather stick with Pune, the industrial corridor, which Jayashree spoke of. But if you were to give me a free hand, I would rather choose the Devanhalli area, and I'll choose something in Naya Raipur. Those will be my two picks.
All right. So if you have the money, then you're looking at the MMR region. If you want to take on the risk, then of course you can look at something like Naya Raipur. And of course, if you want to just sit around and wait for water to eventually reach you, you can look at North Bangalore.
Probably.
These are the options that we have. Of course, if you want more advice on buying land, feel free to write to us. Our email ID is at the bottom of your screen. Send in any question that you have. Let's quickly take a few emails that came in during the week. Inayat Khan has written in, looking to invest in open plots of land in Indapur or Raigad in Maharashtra. What are the future prospects of these areas? Well, you're the expert of Western India. Go on.
Yeah. So Indapur falls actually on the NH17, that's the Goa corridor. And the immediate areas of growth centers are like Mahad, Roha, which has got some MIDC industrial areas and all. Now, these area again holds long-term promises. One of the reason is that the National Highway 17 is getting widened. It's becoming 4-lane road. Then there are these two port, Digi and Rivas, which is getting revived. And there are prospect of new industrial setups being created in and around Roha. So looking at the long-term prospect, holding land in this area certainly beneficial. Now the time horizon could be long, it could be 3 years, it could be 5 years, so it cannot be speculated at the time, but definitely it's in the right kind of corridor, but it's a long-term.
When you say long-term, what do you mean, 10 years, 15 years?
At least 5 years.
At least 5 years.
At least 5 years.
All right, long-term is 5 years
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
It's sounding a lot like our stock market. Okay. Now we have a very interesting question that's coming from Manoj Saxena. Now, he says he'd like to invest in commercial property in and around Mumbai with a long-term horizon. Now, he has a budget of 1.5 to 2 crore rupees. He wants to know if there are good projects or if there's something that he should look at when buying. Should he be looking at maybe a price correction? Now, Shubhankar, I don't know if prices of commercial property are going to correct any further, because we do know that interest, at least in Mumbai, has come back over the last quarter or so. Is the budget of 1.5 to 2 CR too small for Mumbai for commercial property?
Yeah, I would say so. The prices for commercial property has already bottomed out, and now it is the time that the price will consolidate and go up further, because the commercial supply is kind of stagnant. So there is hardly any new supply coming up in the commercial space. So I'm not very sure whether he's talking of ground floor shops or the retail shop also as a commercial, because the ticket size that he has mentioned, probably those kind of assets will be available, ground floor shops, and there are many markets where you can get 1.5 to 2 CR. So normally if you look at the western suburbs, which is I'm talking about Goregaon and beyond, there you can find about 15 to 18,000 rupees square feet. So you can pick up a small shop about 700, 800 square feet kind of.
Is that advisable though? For someone who wants to invest their money right now, who has 2 crores to spare, would you recommend buying retail space in the western suburbs at this point?
Yes, I would do so, because if you have already invested in a residential, and if you want to do a second investment, then commercial is not a bad idea at all, particularly these kind of ground floor shops. There are 2 reasons. One is that the yield for those kind of commercial shops are much higher. It's usually between 6 to 8% around this range. Secondly, ground floor shops are in high demand, mostly with the retailers. So the vacancy periods are almost negligible. So you keep on getting one or the other tenant. Only thing is, like, you have to be a little more active in terms of pursuing and following up your assets, but it's quite possible. And there are capital appreciation also for those kind of ground floor shops.
All right, that's great advice. But, Arvind, for me, Manoj Saxena seems like an ideal candidate for REITs, because he's talking about 1.5, 2 crore rupees. He's a retail investor. If he were to just wait perhaps till the 20th of February when we get some clarity, if at all, or during the budget, and that's the date, 20th of February is the budget announcement that we'll hear from the finance minister, and we're hoping to get some sort of clarity on the tax treatment of REITs. Once that comes in, any investor who has some sort of thought like this should ideally go through REITs, shouldn't they?
Obviously, I was actually wanting to say that for an investor like this, REITs is probably an ideal vehicle. Because if you go out hunting on your own, you'll probably land up with a property which could be good, but which could be troublesome as well. So if you are going to be able to avail of REITs, then you are the ideal candidate.
Of course, if you have REITs, which means that we will be tracking the union budget for you very carefully on this show. For those of you who are unfamiliar with REITs, it's basically a real estate mutual fund, whereas retail investors will pool in all of our money. That money will be used to buy commercial property, office space that will be rented out. So we will make an yield that comes from that rent, and of course the capital appreciation over the years to come. That's the concept. We're waiting for final details from the finance minister, hoping that we'll hear about it in the union budget. right, welcome back. You're watching the Property Guide in 18 now. Thank you for staying with us. All of our guests are still here, so what we're going to do is try and answer as many questions as we can. Puneet Kapil has written in. He tells us he bought a flat in Unitex Uni Homes in Noida. The project is moving very slowly. He says the company is not doing well as well. There are no buyers, he says, for this project at this point. What is your advice? How can I get my money back? Jayashree, what advice would you give somebody like this who's worrying about getting their money back from a project that's not moving fast enough?
Let me put it like this. He's bought into this project at a very low rate. He has bought early on and he's holding on to the project. If you exit today, first of all, even if you find a buyer, you're not going to get the best rate yet. I would say don't be in a hurry to sell unless you desperately need that money. Hold that project, hold your money, let the NGT verdict come out. Only then should you even think about exiting this project. The area has potential. The developer is in trouble. There are many reasons why the project is slow. I would say don't be in a hurry and sell at a distress, because you won't even get the value that you paid for it right now.
All right, await the verdict. Unfortunately, there's nothing to be done now. Just sit and wait. Well, Abhinav Suri has written in, he wants to buy a 3-bedroom apartment in Gurgaon that he'd like to rent out with a budget of 1 crore rupees. He's interested in Sare Homes or M3M Marina in Gurgaon or the Mahindra Aura in Dwarka Expressway. He wants us to help him choose one of those projects. Arvind, Dwarka Expressway or Gurgaon?
Yeah, I mean, of the 3 that he said, you know, Sare or Sair as you want to call it, M3M and Mahindra, I would actually look at the first 2. Not because Mahindra is a bad option, but because it's in a market that's heavily oversupplied today, Dwarka. So I would rather leave that out. I'll look at the first 2. Of the 2, my inclination will be for M3M Marina, primarily because of its being in Sector 71.
All right, no Dwarka Expressway for the time being. That's not another very quick question. Praveen has written in, he wants to buy a home to live in, and he says he wants it to be an investment, which basically means he's hoping for some sort of appreciation. A 2-bedroom flat in Pune with a budget of 60 to 70 lakh rupees. He says he'd like to use it for the next 7 or 8 years and then sell it for huge returns. He's interested in the Amonora Park town in Magarpata, and he wants to know if there are better options in comparison to that one project. What would you recommend he does?
Unfortunately, there is no new supply in Amonora as of now. So, but there are good options available in the nearby areas like Kharadi, like Wagoli. There are several projects coming up in Kharadi, and Kharadi has got excellent infrastructure as well. So within his budget, there are a lot of options available in Kharadi itself. So I would suggest that he should look into the Kharadi market.
All right, look into the Kharadi market, and of course, if you want more advice, you can get in touch with us. We've run out of time on this show. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining in. Jayashree, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. One of these days, I'm going to ask you to come down to Mumbai and join us in the Mumbai studio as well. Thank you so much for watching. Send in questions, reach out to us on Twitter. It'll be our pleasure to hear from you.